I never thought forgetting a single piece of clothing could pry open every door I kept bolted inside me, yet there I was, clutching a paper cup of cheap merlot in a sleepy lakeside tavern, realizing far too late that I'd packed everything for the writer's retreat except my underwear. Jordan didn't notice, of course. He never spotted the small humiliations that clung to me like lint on a black sweater. He was busy scanning the antique jukebox, one elbow nudging the glass as though coaxing it to play our college-era anthem, even in the tavern's dusty amber light. His profile carried its usual quiet confidence, broad shoulders under a charcoal Henley, faded wristband from the road trip gas station still wrapped like a souvenir. Across the warped bar mirror, I watched him laugh at something the bartender said. The reflection doubled me, a little stiff in my leather jacket, and him, all easy lines and careless grace. We'd driven 5 hours to this tucked-away lodge on Lake Argyle, ostensibly to finish the first act of the documentary script we'd been co-writing for months. But secretly, I was hoping proximity might settle the question that had haunted every late-night brainstorming session. Did Jordan ever feel the hush between our sentences the way I did? The tavern smelled of pine sap and old varnish, a buck's head over the fireplace eyed me in silence, disappointed, perhaps, that I'd skipped the sensible checklist any adult employs before a trip. No underwear, one extra camera battery instead, priorities, Noah. I thought wryly. Jordan returned with 2 glasses of local pale ale. He loathed the wine selection and had a vendetta against plastic cups. Trade you, he said, pressing the cool rim against my wrist before I had time to protest. His fingers lingered half a heartbeat too long. I wanted to believe it was deliberate. My pulse certainly did dot. We clinked glasses. Foam kissed the edge and I dabbed it away, suddenly self-conscious of every movement. I shifted on the stool, jeans chafing against, well, nothing. It was alarmingly freeing and terribly distracting. Still can't believe we landed that grant, he said, tapping the wooden counter like a drum. 3 days here, 0 office noise, and only one deadline at the end of it. He flashed. That quick grin, the one that tightened the corners of his eyes and made me forget whatever clever reply I'd prepared. I managed a shrug. Silence can be dangerous. Forces a guy to hear his own thoughts. He studied me, brow creasing maybe at my tone, maybe at the half-finished merlot. Is that why you're drinking that funeral juice? Thought tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Habit, I deflected, swirling the red in its prison of plastic. Truth, I'd started with wine because it calmed the nerves fluttering under my rib cage. The ones that danced whenever Jordan's laugh filled a room, the jukebox crackled to life with an old acoustic track we used to play on dorm balconies after midnight screenings. Instinctively, our eyes met. A shared memory unfolded, projector light washing over brick walls. Him slumped beside me on a beanbag, humming the guitar riff under his breath. Back then, I told myself the electricity was simply creative chemistry. 5 years later, the current only burned brighter. Dance, Jordan teased, nudging my knee with his, my face heated. Kidding, he added, though the way he bit the inside of his cheek suggested he half meant it. Outside, dusk swallowed the lake in violet shadows. Through the open door, the water lapped gently against the dock, whispering possibilities. Every detail felt amplified, the cedar scent from his jacket, the warmth radiating off his calf brushing mine, the single pendant lamp casting halos on the scratched mahogany. I took a breath, almost brave enough to say something reckless. Instead, I raised my ale to unfinished pages and quiet nights. I offered. Jordan's glass met mine with a soft clink that sounded suspiciously like a promise. And to discovering what else we forgot to pack, he added, playful. Unaware of the secret scorching my cheeks, I laughed too loud. Maybe, but the sound tasted like anticipation. Somewhere between the jukebox chords and the harbor lights, I sensed the weekend shifting on its axis. A forgotten layer of cotton might have stayed in my dresser drawer, but whatever hid between Jordan and me had most certainly decided to come along for the ride. Jordan and I had been orbiting each other since freshman orientation, when we were both placed in the same documentary filmmaking class. I remembered him walking in late with a coffee stain on his hoodie and a camera strap slung round his neck like it was part of his DNA, while the rest of us were still fumbling with focus settings. Jordan already shot like a man who saw stories everywhere in dust motes, in graffiti, in the curve of someone's shoulder as they cried behind a diner. We partnered up for a project on Forgotten Towns, and by week 3, we were finishing each other's sentences in the edit room. somewhere between gas station burritos and overnight shoots in the middle of nowhere. A strange ease settled between us. It never required explanation. I didn't have to pretend to be anything. I wasn't with Jordan. He saw me now. 5 years later, that bond had only deepened. We didn't talk every day. He was a freelancer who bounced between continents, and I taught media theory at a local college, but we always found each other again, and when we did, it was as if no time had passed. He remembered the smallest things, my irrational fear of fish with human-looking eyes, my habit of always checking if doors were locked twice, the way I like my popcorn slightly burnt. In return, I remembered how he always wore mismatched socks and couldn't fall asleep without ambient forest sounds playing. Still a light sleeper? I asked as we unpacked in our shared cabin. The place smelled of cedar and old pine furniture. Twin beds stood on opposite sides of the room, a single woven rug in between. A small fireplace crackled gently in the corner. Jordan glanced over his shoulder from where he was tossing his duffel bag onto the mattress. Only, if you start narrating your dreams again, you still talk in your sleep, only when someone asks evasive questions like that. I shot back. We exchanged smirks. That was our rhythm, gentle jabs, soft laughter, silence that didn't need to be filled. I took the bed by the window, out of habit more than preference. I like watching the world retreat at night. As I folded clothes into the narrow dresser, I froze. No underwear, just the bare outline of boxer shorts I'd foolishly assume I'd packed. I glanced at Jordan, who was distracted unzipping camera gear. No way I was asking to borrow anything. Instead, I grabbed my toiletries bag and announced, "Going to shower before the water turns to glacier runoff." Jordan grinned without looking up. "Good call. I heard the pipes cry if you wait too long." Steam filled the narrow bathroom as I stripped down and stepped under the hot stream. My mind replayed the moment he touched my wrist at the tavern, his fingers cool, effortless. He touched everyone like that without hesitation. It meant nothing, and yet it did. By the time I came out, towel around my waist and hair damp, Jordan had lit the fireplace and was scrolling through footage on his laptop, face bathed in orange glow. His socks were mismatched again, one with tiny tacos, the other black with stars. "Comfortable?" he asked, eyeing my towel with a teasing arch of his brow. "Don't start," I warned, my voice a little tighter than intended. He laughed. "Just saying. The whole aesthetic screams college flashback. All we need is a broken shower curtain and a roommate walking in at the worst moment." I threw a sock at him. He ducked, still chuckling. Later, we sat cross-legged on the rug, sorting through years of shared footage for the documentary. A lot of it was handheld chaos, Jordan filming a thunderstorm from a barn roof, me trying to interview a farmer while fighting off a rogue rooster. But some of it was quieter, the camera lingering on wind through wheat, the hush of abandoned train tracks, a silhouette of me watching the sunrise with my hood pulled up. "You always film me when I'm not looking," I murmured. He didn't look up from the screen. "That's when you're the most yourself." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick, like honey, stretching out slowly between his dot around midnight. We discovered the complication. Jordan unrolled his sleeping bag and frowned. "You've got to be kidding me." I looked up from brushing my teeth. "What?" He held up the zipper, completely jammed and halfway open. "I think I left it half-zip last camping trip. It's basically a large scarf now." I snorted. "You mean a decorative death trap?" He shook his head. "Looked like I'm bunking with hypothermia tonight." "Take the extra blanket," I offered. He threw me a look. "You mean that glorified napkin in the closet?" "No thanks, I'll just sleep on top of yours." "You're not touching my bed. We've shared worse." The words hung in the air. It was true. There was that one night in grad school when we crashed at a stranger's house after missing the last bus. One couch, no pillows, and we ended up back to back like awkward penguins. Nothing had happened except everything in my chest. Now, as he looked at me with that familiar spark, half daring, half inviting, I hesitated. "Fine," I said, tossing him my blanket. "But if you steal my body heat in the middle of the night, I'm kicking you off the bed." He smirked, already toeing off his socks. "Deal, but I'm keeping the better pillow." We slid under the covers, the cabin filled with the soft crackle of firewood and distant water lapping outside. His arm brushed mine, accidental, maybe, but it stayed. I closed my eyes and breathed in cedar, cold night air, and something else. Something that felt like a question forming in the dark. Dawn slid a pale ribbon of silver across Lake Argyle, and Jordan decided the light was too honest to waste. Before I'd fully shaken sleep from my eyes, we were hauling a dented aluminum skiff down the lodge's narrow dock, cameras, and thermos balance between us. My ribs still remember the heat of his arm from sharing a bed. Now the morning air was cold enough to sting. 6 magic, he said, handing me a life vest that smelled of sun-bleached nylon and cedar smoke. Trust me. I trusted him enough to climb it first, though I sat at the bow instead of the safer middle seat, anything to keep distance from the memory of his shoulder grazing mine all night. Jordan untied the mooring rope with practiced ease, hopped in, and fired the tiny outboard. The motor coughed, then purred. We glided into open water that mirrored the sky, so perfectly it felt like drifting through frost-blue glass. He anchored us near a stand of drowned pines jutting from the lake bed. Like skeletal guardians, sunlight crept over the ridge, igniting the mist. Jordan crouched beside me, steady hands adjusting my focus ring as though the lens were an extension of his own body. His breath ghosted my cheek. Hold it right there, he murmured. I held more than the camera. I held the ache in my sternum, the warm pulse hammering my throat, the restless wish that he'd keep finding excuses to inch closer. After 20 minutes of silent shooting, Jordan killed the engine to record natural ambience. The hush felt enormous. Even the loons were sleeping in. He stretched, flexing chilled fingers, then pulled a battered flask from his jacket. Hot chocolate, he clarified, offering it across the cramped space. I've matured since whiskey days, sort of. I took a sip. The lid brushed my lip where his thumb still lingered. Too intimate, too soon. I set the flask on the bench, forcing a laugh. You sure we're not ruining the purity of your perfect dawn footage with all this slurping? Ambient slurping, he echoed with a grin, very avant-garde. The motor chose that exact moment to sputter, hiccup, and die. We exchanged a glance. Jordan pumped the primer bolt. Nothing. He tried the starter cord again. Silence except for a soft clunk of metal surrendering. Great, he muttered, leaning over the engine. The sudden tilt rocked the skiff. I grabbed his belt loop to steady him, pulse ricocheting at the accidental intimacy. My fingers stayed a second longer than necessary until he righted himself, eyes catching mine with a question neither of us voiced. No signal out here, I said, checking my phone more for something to do than hope of rescue. A single bar flickered, vanished. Jordan scanned the shoreline, miles of pine and granite ledges. The lodge dock was a shrinking toothpick in the distance. Well, he sighed, settling onto the middle bench beside me. We either wait for another boat or row. We have one oar, I reminded him. The other must have slipped out when we launched. He gave an exaggerated shrug. Then we become masters of asymmetrical propulsion. He said it so lightly, as though being stranded in open water was another film school experiment. Yet his knee pressed against mine, steady, warm through denim. Every subtle bob of the hull nudged us closer. Space, like the motor, had stopped cooperating. Minutes stretched. The lake glittered. A kingfisher dipped and rose. Jordan studied the horizon, thumb tracing up some circles on the gunwale. I traced silent circles in my mind. Tell him. No. Ruin everything. Tell him anyway. Coward. He broke the quiet first. Remember that night on the barn roof in Cedar Falls? His shoulder rolled against mine as he turned. We filmed lightning for 2 hours, even after the tripod blew over. No lightning, I corrected instinctively, but my voice cracked. Just sheet flashes behind clouds. Jordan's mouth twitched. Same difference. He leaned back, arms stretched along the rail, framing the sky with his silhouette. The gesture opened his chest inches from mine. You kept talking about narrative arcs even while soaking wet. I thought you were ridiculous. I swallowed the memory warm with embarrassment and something sweeter. I was ridiculous, still am. He shook his head. Actually, it's what made me think, maybe this guy's worth sticking around for. The words fluttered between us like startled birds. My heart leapt to chase them, yet my tongue stalled. Instead, I cleared my throat and rose, pretending to test the oar's reach. The skiff lurched. I lost balance. Jordan caught my hips instinctively, both hands circling with a familiarity that felt reckless. Heat blazed through fabric and bone easy. His voice softened, dipping into a register that pulled goosebumps up my arms. He didn't let go right away. Neither did I step back. I forced a joke because bravery deserted me. Trying to drown me so you can get sole credit on the documentary, please. Your name's cooler on festival posters. He squeezed one splayful butt. The pressure lingered like punctuation after an unfinished sentence. We decided to row. With only one oar, we had to sit thigh to thigh on the center bench, passing the paddle between us every few strokes to keep from pinwheeling. The motion required cooperation so intimate it could have been choreography. His forearm brushing my ribs as he reached forward, my knee sliding between his when we switched. Soon, sweat prickled under my collar despite the cold air. Jordan hummed our dorm anthem under his breath. I matched the rhythm without thinking. Our voice is weaving like the oar's drip pattern. Every time our gazes collided, something quiet but seismic shifted inside me. Half an hour in, we were still far from shore. He handed me the oar and rubbed warmth into my stiff fingers, oblivious or pretending to be how the gesture scorched. "Don't let the joints lock," he said, thumbs pressing my palm. "I'm a typist, not a rower." I managed, watching our hands entwine like threads. The skin and our knuckles looked seamless. The oar slipped, brackish water splashed our jeans. Jordan laughed, shook droplets from his hair, and wiped my cheek with the pad of his thumb, a tender, unthinking sweep that left me trembling. "You all right?" he whispered, suddenly serious. I nodded, though my voice failed. He looked ready to ask more, but the lake answered for us, wine catching the hull, nudging toward a rocky inlet. We steered into it, scraping the ground on a narrow strip of pebbled shore far from any trail. Pulling the skiff onto land required shoulder-to-shoulder effort. Once beached, we collapsed on damp moss, panting. Jordan sprawled back, palms behind his head. I sat cross-legged, staring at lake light flickering across his unshaven jaw. He turned, propped on one elbow, curiosity flickering. "Is it weird," he asked, tone careful, "that I'm enjoying being stuck with you?" The world hushed. Even the breeze held its breath. I swallowed. "Depends how you define weird." He grazed a pine needle along the back of my hand, feather soft. "Define it for me." The invitation hung there bare, terrifying. I almost seized it, but footfalls cracked in the forest above. Voices to hikers cresting the ridge. The spell fractured. Jordan sat up, calling for help, waving. Within minutes, the hikers radioed the lodge for a rescue boat. Practicality flooded back like cold water, dousing whatever embers had sparked. Yet as we waited, Jordan's knee stayed glued against mine, and neither of us mentioned moving. My heart ached with all the words I hadn't spoken, but his steady pressure whispered what my voice was too afraid to say. "We're not finished, not even close." And for the first time since the motor died, I was grateful for the silence, because in that silence, promise breathed. The rescue boat reached the lodge pier a little after noon, its engine thumping like an anxious heartbeat against the planks. Staff hurried down with blankets and thermoses, but Jordan laughed off the fuss, claiming the adventure was free. Production value. I tried to match his breezy confidence, yet inside I vibrated with unsaid syllables. Each time his arm brushed mine while we climbed the path, the phantom warmth of his hands on my hips earlier that morning resurfaced, insistent. As a drum, back in the cabin, sunlight slanted through dust motes, an almost holy hush settling on the room. Jordan set our damp camera bags by the hearth to dry, then disappeared to the communal kitchen for real food. I stripped off my lake soggy jeans, remembering again the missing underwear. The small absurdity felt suddenly enormous, and unintentional secrecy against my skin, mirroring everything I still hid from him. He returned with a covered tray, cheeks pink from wind. "Chef-made elk chili," he announced, sliding it onto the rug between the beds, plus contraband brownies. Don't ask. We ate in companionable silence, spoons clicking ceramic, fire crackling. Between mouthfuls, Jordan replayed raw footage on his laptop, and I caught glimpses of myself in them eyelids half closed in awe at the sunrise, lips parted as though on the verge of confession. It was disorienting to see my longing framed so plainly by his lens, yet he made no comment, as if editing those feelings in high definition were the most natural thing in the world. By late afternoon, clouds thickened over the ridge. Not a storm, they just dulled the light to pewter. The generator hummed unevenly, cabin bulbs flickering. Jordan stacked more logs into the fireplace, sparks spiraling up the flue. "Power's iffy," he said, voice low. "You okay if we go?" Analog for the evening. I can set candles, make it look like a seance. A seance for forgotten deadlines, I joked, though my throat felt tight. The idea of candlelight narrowed the room in ways both dangerous and irresistible. He arranged stubby tea lights along the mantel anyway, fingers deft, turning the cabin amber. When he straightened, our gazes collided in the half-dark. Neither of us looked away quickly enough. My pulse thudded so loud I worried he'd hear it over the generator's sputter. Jordan cleared his throat first. "I'm gonna shower wash off the lake smell." He vanished into the bathroom, A minute later, the generator coughed once and died. The overhead light blinked out. The fire became the only source of glow. Water shut off midstream, and Jordan swore behind the door. I almost laughed. Forced closeness. Act 2. Courtesy. Of rural infrastructure. He emerged wrapped in a towel, hair dripping. Candlelight traced golden edges along his collarbones, and I forgot whatever sentence I'd rehearsed. He rubbed at his damp curls, chuckling ruefully, half clean, half very aware of gravity. His eyes flicked to my face, searching for the joke to land. Instead of laughing, I blurted, "You filmed me again today." He froze, towel poised over his head. "Guilty," he admitted slowly. "Did it bother you?" "No." I swallowed. "Yes. I don't know. It's like you're archiving moments I'm still trying to understand." Jordan lowered the towel, expression softening. "I shoot what matters," he said. "What moves me?" Those words hovered, heavy as embers. I rose, stepping to the hearth to add a log I didn't need, hands trembling slightly. The flames flared, revealing how close he'd followed. So close the warmth of his bare shoulder kissed my sleeve. The silence stretched until something inside me tremored. I turned, words tumbling out before fear could dam them. "Do you remember asking me to define weird?" His brow knit, then smoothed with recognition. "On the shore. Yeah, it's being in a boat with you praying the engine never starts. It's sharing a bed and pretending the only reason my heart's racing is caffeine. It's realizing the missing piece of cloth underneath my jeans. Feels less intimate than the way you say my name when you think I'm not listening." My voice cracked on that last admission. Jordan's lips parted. Candlelight flickered across his eyes. And for a terrifying second I thought he might laugh. Instead, he whispered, "Noah." I shook my head, suddenly breathless. "Let me finish before courage evaporates." I pressed my palms together, knuckles whitening. "We've spent 5 years orbiting. Every time I start to believe it's mutual, I chicken out. Because if I'm wrong, I lose my best friend and the stories we haven't told yet. But if I'm right and stay silent, I lose myself. So weird is wanting both things and choosing neither. The confession pulled between. U.S., bright and raw. I felt stripped more naked than the underwear fiasco could ever manage. Jordan exhaled shakily, then took a tentative step closer, towel knotted loosely at his waist, shoulders glimmering with evaporating droplets. "You think you've been the only one terrified." His voice was rough silk. "I've photographed 1,000 strangers. But the idea of turning the lens on myself this scared me blind. I kept telling myself I was misreading you, or that our timing was off. Except the timing never changed and neither did the feeling." He reached out, fingers brushing mine. The touch was feather light, yet it sent an electric zip up my arm. "Can I show you something?" he asked. I nodded, unable to speak. He opened his laptop, battery still alive. On screen flashed a still frame. Me on the skiff this morning, camera raised, dawn firelighting my hair. Jordan clicked play. In the clip, he was filming me instead of the sunrise. His voice behind the camera whispered, nearly inaudible, "Beautiful." Then he laughed at himself and swung the lens to the horizon, as though scared of what he'd spill. I stared at the screen, throat tight. When the clip ended, he closed the laptop softly, leaving only the fire's glow. "That wasn't for the documentary," he said. "That was me, trying to keep what I cared about." He swallowed. "But I think I care more about what happens off camera." The air seemed to contract. My pulse hammered so hard it ached. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying," he interrupted, gently, "that I'm still terrified, but I don't want fear to keep directing our story." The towel slipped fractionally at his hip. He caught it with a laugh, suddenly self-conscious. The mundane motion broke the tension just enough for me to breathe. "It's unfair how good your timing is," I managed, voice hoarse. "You confess," while half naked, leaving me no room to be eloquent. He shrugged, a blush rising under candlelight. "I forgot clean clothes. Guess we're even." A nervous chuckle escaped me, then melted into something else when Jordan's fingers grazed my wrist, resting over the spot where he'd touched me at the tavern. The identical pressure felt like a callback, a question posed again, louder. I turned my hand over, interlacing my fingers with his. "What happens if we say yes to this?" I whispered. "Maybe we ruin everything," he answered, eyes earnest. "But maybe we build something better." Tom slowed, fire popping, wind caressing the eaves, his breath brushing my cheek. Our foreheads leaned together, first an instinctive tilt that felt older than memory. Then our noses bumped softly, and he murmured, "Okay," against my skin. I closed the remaining distance. The first kiss was a trembling exhale, more surrender than conquest. His lips were warm, tentative, tasting faintly of chocolate and lake air. My stomach swooped, knees nearly buckling as his hand curved around the back of my neck, thumb stroking the edge of my jaw. I answered with equal caution, frightened by the depth unsealed yet hungry for it. He pulled back a fraction, eyes glimmering. "I've wanted that since sophomore year." I laughed, half tears, half disbelief. "That longer," he confessed, brushing another kiss to the corner of my mouth. "But let's not waste more years quantifying." He guided us to sit before the hearth, back against his bed frame, legs tangled. My head found the hollow of his shoulder, and he wrapped the oversized knit blanket around us both, tucking it like a secret pact. The fire painted gold onto every surface, and for once I wasn't analyzing the symbolism, I was living it. We talked in low murmurs, stumbling admissions, jokes to keep from crying, mapping the timeline of missed signals. Every so often our voices faded, replaced by soft, exploratory kisses. Each connection felt like a new paragraph in a story rewriting itself in real time. At some point, the generator coughed back to life, bulbs blinking overhead. Neither of us moved to switch them on. Candlelight was enough. Jordan traced a lazy line down my forearm. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what this means outside lakes and cabins." I nodded against his chest. "And the documentary, new title," he said, tilting my chin so I met his grin. "Do idiots finally get the shot?" I snorted. "Catchy. Working title." His expression softened. "We'll workshop it together. I'm done filming around the truth." A peaceful hush settled, deeper than any silence before. My earlier dread of altering our bond felt distant, replaced by an expanding horizon of possibilities. Somewhere in the cabin, our damp clothes steamed near the hearth, and I realized even the absence under my jeans no longer embarrassed me. I was stripped of far more crucial layers already, and Jordan was still here, warmer than any fabric. Outside, twilight deepened, the lake mirroring us in dark glass reflections. I closed my eyes, breathing in cedar smoke, candle wax, and the faint citrus of his shampoo. His heartbeat drummed under my ear, steady, certain. For the first time since we arrived, I didn't question the silence. It no longer held unspoken fears, it cradled promises. And in that quiet, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of moss and pine and him, I understood the trip had already given us its best footage, everything from her. The fire dwindled to embers before either of us remembered the concept of time. My cheek still rested against Jordan's chest, but the hush between us felt different now, no longer a careful pause, but a shared breath, every so often one of us grinned for no reason, the way people do when they wake from a dream and realize it was real. "Your heart's finally slowed," he murmured, fingertips tracing idle constellations along my spine through the blanket. "That's only because you've stopped kissing me long enough to let it catch up," I teased. He laughed, the sound rumbling against my ear, and I felt it more than heard it. Noted, "Scientific research suggests another sample is required, purely for data integrity," I agreed, tilting up for a soft, lingering kiss that tasted faintly of melted chocolate and would smoked out when we pulled apart. I nudged him with my shoulder. "You realize this ruins our reputations as emotionally unavailable creatives. Speak for yourself." He shot back. "I'm still wildly mysterious." I arched a brow. "Mysterious? You film squirrels doing backflips and wear taco socks. Art is about contrasts." He pinched the blanket edge in mock offense, then sobered, eyes searching mine. "Seriously though, are we okay?" No panic setting in, a gentle flutter. Not panic, stirred inside me. I'm more grounded than I expected. Maybe because we finally stepped off the Mabel edge. He nodded. "Doesn't feel like falling when someone's holding your hand." Outside, the lake lapped softly, a lullaby we'd started to understand. Candle stubs guttered, their flames bowing low. I tucked the blanket tighter over us. "So what happens when we leave here?" Real life has loud opinions. Jordan considered this, twisting a frayed wick between his fingers. "My passport chews up half the calendar," he said. "Your lecture schedule fills the rest. Long-distance relationships are basically scheduling apps in disguise." "Then we learn to sync calendars," I replied, half smiling. "And maybe crazy thought we say no to projects that keep us on opposite hemispheres for months." His eyes softened. "You'd really rearrange your orbit for me?" "I've been orbiting you for 5 years anyway. Might as well make it intentional." He exhaled, relief flickering across his face like morning light. Okay, then let's start. With the next month, I have a short form geese both drivable. That buys time to plan a bigger doc we can shoot together. I lifted a brow. Co-directors? And co-everything else, he said, brushing his nose against mine. We'll fight over whose name goes first in the credits. Alphabetical. I deadpan. I win. He groaned. Fine, but only if I get final cut on our wedding montage. My pulse skipped. The word wasn't a proposal, just a joke hanging in the glow. Yet it planted a seed that warmed rather than startled me. Deal, I whispered, surprised at how right it felt. We spent the next hour trading tiny confessions, how he'd kept every voicemail I'd ever left, how I'd once written a story about an unnamed filmmaker whose camera could never quite capture the boy he loved. Jordan demanded to read it. I counter-demanded. He burned the raw footage of me sleep-talking during a stakeout. Compromise ensued. He'd screen the embarrassing clips. Only if I provided dramatic voiceover commentary. Gradually fatigue settled over us, the comfortable weariness of campfire nights. Jordan snagged his backpack from the floor and pulled out a pair of clean boxer briefs, bright teal, with tiny llamas. Souvenir from Peru, he said, waggling his brows. Want them? I owe you after the underwear debacle. I snorted, generous. But the llamas feel like a statement piece. He tossed them anyway. Consider it a deposit on future laundry malpractice. We changed under dim lamplight, no shyness now. Just soft laughter and bumping elbows. When we crawled into my bed, the mattress dipped. We ended up nose to nose beneath a single quilt that smelled of pine detergent. Do we sleep or keep talking till sunrise? Jordan whispered. Sleep, I decided, brushing hair from his forehead. We promised Chef we'd film his dawn fishing routine. He grimaced. Ah yes, B-roll before breakfast. Welcome to co-direction. I pecked his lips. Try not to hog the pillow this time. No guarantees, he murmured, already settling his arm around my waist. The cabin dimmed to quiet hums, crackling embers. Distant water, our scents breathing. Eyes closed, I replayed the day like a reel. The stalled skiff, rocky shore, candlelit confession. That first trembling kiss. Fear still existed, but it had shrunk to a manageable note beneath a swelling score of possibility died just before sleep. Claimed us. Jordan's thumb traced small circles on my hip. Hey, Noah, tomorrow when we point cameras at the lake, remind me to turn one around. I don't want to forget what this looks like from the inside. My throat tightened with something vast and bright. I squeezed his hand. We'll film it together, frame by frame. He squeezed back, and under the whisper of moss-scented quilts, commitment settled like gentle gravity, unhurried, inevitable, and already beginning. The next morning, light streamed through the slats of the wooden blinds, washing everything in a honeyed glow. I blinked awake to the sound of muffled birdsong and the soft rhythm of Jordan's breathing against my shoulder. One of his legs was tangled around mine, arm draped over my chest like it belonged there, and maybe it did now. For a moment, I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling and tried to commit the feeling to memory, the warmth of him beside me, the steadiness of it all. We hadn't broken anything by admitting the truth. We'd only added a new chapter to a story that had been writing itself for years. Jordan stirred, squinting at the light. Tell me we overslept and missed the fishing shoot. We overslept and missed the fishing shoot, I echoed obediently. He grinned into my chest, voice still gravel-edged with sleep. Perfect. We eventually got up, reluctantly peeling ourselves from the cocoon of the blanket. As we dressed, I watched him fold his towel and toss me his second pair of socks with a wink. This pair had tiny planets on them. I didn't ask if it was intentional, he didn't need to say it. Jordan was always trying to leave little galaxies. In the small things. The morning passed slowly, beautifully. We walked the trail along the lake's edge, hands brushing occasionally until mine finally laced through his without preamble. He squeezed back once and didn't let go. At one point, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. I wrote this before we left. He admitted. Didn't know if I'd have the guts to say anything, so I figured I'd write it down just in case. He handed it to me. I unfolded it carefully, eyes scanning the words and even, scratched out in places, deeply Jordan. No, I don't know how to say this in person without ruining what we have, but I think about you more than I should. I notice the way you talk, with your hands, how your face softens when you're lost in thought. I'm scared to say it out loud, but I want more than edits and deadlines. I want mornings with you. I want silence with you. I want the chance to be something real, whatever that looks like, but only if you want it to. I folded the paper again. then tucked it into my jacket like something worth keeping forever. I do, I said. No hesitation now. I want all of it. Jordan smiled, slower this time, the kind of smile that says I'm safe here. That afternoon, we filmed the final shots we needed, only now. We weren't just documenting landscapes or empty spaces, we filmed each other not with the same cautious distance, but with a newfound honesty. I caught Jordan squinting at me through the lens with that same half-smirk he wore back in college, and I grinned back. When I turned the camera on him, he didn't look away. Later, as we packed up the gear, I clipped one of our lavalier mix to the edge of the cabin's back porch railing and hit record. Jordan tilted his head. Ambient. No, I said. I want to remember the sound of the wind, the fire crackle, your dumb boots on the stairs. Just us. Before anything changes again. He nodded like he understood something I hadn't even said yet. We spent our final evening wrapped in a blanket, feet propped on the windowsill, watching the lake swallow the sun. Words were few. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because so much had already been said without needing volume. I was thinking, Jordan said after a while, when we get back, maybe we don't go back to the way things were. Not even pretending to. I looked over. His hand was resting palm up on the edge of the blanket, open and waiting. We won't, I said, placing my hand in his. He leaned his head against mine. Voice quiet. We'll figure it out, right? Absolutely, I replied. We've been doing this together for years. We just didn't know what to call it. Jordan laughed, brushing a kiss to my temple. So what do we call it now? I thought for a second, then grinned. Home. He squeezed my hand. That'll do. The next morning, we loaded the car and said goodbye to the cabin. Before we left, Jordan pulled a Sharpie from the glove box and scrawled something on a flat stone he found near the dock. What are you doing? Leaving a marker, he said. I stepped closer to read it. It said, we were here, and we stopped running. Jay and Nee smiled. You know people are going to think we eloped in the woods. Let them, he said, tossing the stone gently into the reeds, where it would rest hidden but present. Like the quiet shift between friends and something more. As we pulled away from the lodge, the lake disappearing in the rear view. Jordan reached across the gear bags in the back seat and slipped his fingers into mine. I didn't let go, and just like that, we began something new. Not a perfect love story, but an honest one still in progress, one that would stretch across cities, time zones, maybe even oceans, but would always trace back to a quiet cabin, a broken motor, and a missing pair of underwear that somehow, impossibly, brought us home to each other.